Livable Munster character-based code project. This is the culmination of, let's see, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, 5 days of interaction with the residents and businesses in Munster, with the goal of putting together the parameters of our new zoning ordinance. As I said on Thursday night when we kicked this off, the town passed a comprehensive plan in 2010. Since then, a number of things have changed, but a number of things have stayed the same. And what we're doing with this zoning ordinance is kind of taking those principles, that vision that was laid out in the comprehensive plan, and using it to develop a tool to actually guide on-the-ground development. So that's what the zoning ordinance is. It's the law as far as how Munster is going to look now and in the future. So to that end, as I said, we've been working with the community for 5 days. We brought in a consultant from Franklin, Tennessee, Town Planning and Urban Design Collaborative. And they've been here in the town hall, behind their laptops, meeting with residents, mapping things out. They were over at the farmer's market. And they're really trying to get a sense of what the people of Munster want to see for their community. So, as I mentioned, we've been gathering all this input. Tonight is the work in progress presentation where they're going to show you what you've told them. And without further ado, I think the next thing we're going to do is actually, are we doing the raffle?
Thank you, Tom. Hi, everyone, it's Sandrine. Before we get to the main course here, we just have a quick little raffle. Hopefully the owners will fill in a quick raffle, and we have another little surprise for you. But I have to tell you, you were in for a treat tonight because Brian's been feeling under the weather, so you were going to get Becky and I presenting tonight. But unfortunately, he's feeling better, so you're going to be stuck with Brian again. But so I'm so sorry about that. But in the meantime,
I've got a pair of pool passes.
So pool passes. We have Mike Hawkins. Is Mike in the room? So don't run with the ball. Congratulations. Thank you for coming. Thanks to the town for providing this, by the way. We have Matt McDonald in the room for the pool pass.
Thank you very much.
Leave the box with me. Okay, next one. See if you guys are here. You have to be here to win. So Kate Jones. Yeah, another full pass. And now we're moving on to golf passes. And 3 of those. Who are going to be the lucky ones? Scully Patrick. All right, congratulations. Do you play golf? Hey, anyone who plays golf, you know who to talk to later on. Just saying. And Margaret? I can't read the last name. Do we have a Margaret in the room? What's your last name?
Kaiser.
Yes, that looks like that. Sorry. I'm French Canadian, so I have a challenge with names sometimes. Wonderful. Well, congratulations and thank you all. And so before we get going, we did a little surprise for you guys, just a little something we want to show you real quick here. Just a little video for those of you who haven't been around during the week of everything we've been up to.
You here?
Yeah.
On the wall, right?
So hopefully many of you saw yourselves in some of these. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Brian to kick it off for you guys.
All right, so did everybody get snacks and drinks? Everybody's well hydrated, and I'm trying to make sure I'm able to make it to the end. So bear with me if I go a little slower than normal. I'm feeling so great as Andrew said. But so anybody is a first timer, first Planapalooza event tonight? Wow, that's great, wonderful. Okay, good. So if we haven't met, my name's Brian Wright. I'm the principal of Town Planning and Urban Design Collaborative. And you just met part of my team. There's a couple of more team members here on the front row. And we've been here for several days now, trying to really engage with the community and understand what it is you're looking for in the future. We know that in every community we work in all across the country, there's a lot of differing opinions, a lot of different things people are looking for, different things that people are excited about, and also different things that people are fearful of in some cases too. And so we've heard, I think maybe every version of that. So we've been really listening hard. And so the presentation tonight, I'm going to go through and just kind of get you up to speed as to what we've been doing, what we've been thinking, what we've been hearing. And then we're going to open it up for question and answers like we always do. And we'll talk to you as long as you want to talk and have questions to ask. And really make sure that what we heard this week is reflective of what the community is looking for. Because in the end, this is your town, this is your zoning ordinance, and it needs to be representative of what you're looking for. So a little bit about zoning. The zoning is based on your primary document, the comprehensive plan. And for those who have been here with us in other events, we've gone through this a little bit, but there's always new people, so I'm going to take you back to the beginning for a minute. So the comprehensive plan is a long-range policy document, and it's really about establishing a vision for the future of the town. You guys worked on your last comprehensive plan in 2010, so it's got a few years on it now, but it was well done in the first place, and it provides policy guidance for growth and development for the future. And it also has specific actions that say, do this and do that to help you get to the end goals that the comprehensive plan contains. You have a vision statement in there, and it says, your vision is in the next 20 years, Munster will remain strong as one of the most livable, attractive, prosperous towns in the Northwest Indiana region and larger Chicagoland region for residents, businesses, and visitors. So we picked up on that word livable, and that's why we talk about livable Munster through this process. So the comprehensive plan had a few goals. We talked about promoting sustainable growth. We talked about supporting transit as critical to a prosperous town. We also see in there that it talks about creating a legacy of unique parks and open spaces, growing as a hub of the regional trail system, strengthening the infrastructure to meet future needs, as well as redeveloping old areas as walkable mixed-use centers. So that's what's contained in the comprehensive plan. And so now what we're doing is walking through the process of updating the zoning to be in keeping with these ideas that are in the comprehensive plan. So what zoning is, if you're not familiar with zoning, it's really just figuring out what you can do with your property. And so a lot of communities that we work in, there are people who say, I don't want you to tell me what to do with my property. Little do they know, there's already zoning in place that's telling you what you can do with your property. And so really what we're doing now is fine-tuning that, the ordinances, the laws about what you can do. And in some cases, actually trying to give people more flexibility to allow their property to be more valuable. In other cases, we're looking to protect and preserve what people love. I'll talk more about that in a second. But the zoning doesn't actually build anything or cause anything to happen. It's really about setting the guides and limitations on what people could do within certain zones. So we had a project kickoff a couple of months ago, and it was quite well attended. It was, over 100 people came and participated in that, and sometimes I think that we make people feel too comfortable that night, and we should have said some scary things so more people would come out throughout this week. But that's a good sign. People were really, a lot of people were really fired up when they got there. They were really concerned and had, I could see the agitation in them and the questions that they asked. And so we really worked hard to work through that and understand, what were the issues and what were the things that people were concerned about. And so we also, in that evening, we had, a couple of thousand people watching online. And just so you know, we also are streaming live right now. So your neighbors who aren't here are watching online on Facebook Live. And it's been a really great tool for us to be able to reach out to people who, maybe this wasn't convenient for them to come to tonight, or the meetings and interactions we've had throughout the past 5 days. They couldn't come for whatever reason. And so there are people at home who are watching this, and it's great because they can actually make comments as well. Now, it's funny the type of comments that we get. I mentioned sometimes they say, like, boy, that guy's shirt is really stupid. Can you believe he's wearing that tonight? Or whatever. But other times people take the opportunity to give really meaningful critiques and discussions and share their concerns, because we're actually collecting all of the information from all the sources, even the online stuff that's going on. And so that's important and helpful for us. So if you're at home, please make sure you give us some really good, meaningful comments as we go through this process this evening. As you saw in the video, we've had a really robust week of different things. We had a kickoff presentation. After that, we did this mapping exercise while the people there broke up into groups and started to identify certain areas that they really loved and areas that needed improvement and other things, and they shared their ideas with us and presented to the rest of the group. It was really great to get that input. So there's about 40 people or so there, and that was nice. Now, one of the things that somebody said in the kickoff a couple months ago when we had more than 100 people in the room was, well, this isn't very many people compared to the entire population of the town. How are we supposed to know what the entire town wants to do? And what we saw in that night at the workshop 4 or 5 nights ago was what I said to them that night. I said, if you get a few people in the room, about 10 or 20 people even, as long as they have sort of a different set of ideas, they're not all exactly the same, they don't all necessarily live on the same street, they may not be all relatives or friends, you can actually, with a surprisingly small number of people, start to understand what the issues are. What we saw in those groups at that hands-on workshop is that when people presented, by the time you got to about the third group, you were hearing the same ideas and same thoughts and same concerns again and again and again. And so it really just goes to show that it doesn't take some massive, the majority of the population to come and participate in the process for you to feel like the results are valid. So that's really meaningful to a lot of people who like the numbers. So we also had a series of technical meetings or meetings with specific topics. So we talked to developers and landowners. We talked to neighborhood groups. We talked to several different types. We had several types of meetings. They were all open to anybody who wanted to come, but they just had sort of topics that guided the discussion. And that was great. And we even streamed them live as well, which was a first for us. So that was neat that people could participate in those meetings. And so from that, we were able to start to understand some of the specifics, some of the things that you might not get into in this type of a setting where people are talking at a higher level generally. There we could really understand, what are, if you're a landowner or a business owner, how has the current zoning impacted you or your business or whatever. So that was helpful for us to understand. And then we went in and set up a booth at the farmer's market, and that was great because it was, an informal setting, and people were able to come up and give their input and tell us what type of development or type of building they were looking for, where the center of town should be. So we heard there wasn't one, and those sorts of things, and that was great. And we actually had a really good stream of people coming the entire time while we were at the farmer's market. And there were a lot of dots that were put on these maps. And so, for instance, this what type of buildings belong in Munster. And so we had different pictures: live work, big box, mixed-use buildings, industrial, corner stores, single-use commercial buildings, etc. and people put dots on the things that they would be most excited to see in future development, or things that were missing here. And you start to see that the top dots were on the live works, on the mixed-use buildings, corner stores, detached single-family homes, accessory units, which is like an apartment over a garage, or oh, there we go. Thanks, Sandrine. Sandrine says, look at the next slide. And or row houses as well. And so, so that was helpful for us to start to understand. You know, I don't know if we gave anybody the opportunity to put an X on the picture and say we don't want any of this, but you can start to see by the numbers of dots which ones were people most excited about. And then we looked at where should the center of Munster be, and you can start to see how the dots broke out for that one. And what should the center look like? So we had a series of images from all sorts of different places, and these two in the middle, these two were the top vote getters. And you can see why. You know, they're pretty exciting. Obviously, you don't have a mountain that comes with development, but I think the idea was just sort of a lively streetscape, people, shops, and that sort of thing. So those are the top vote getters there. We also had an opportunity for kids to participate. And so kids could draw a picture of your favorite place in Munster. And so I think this, I don't know if this was Shoop's or no, there's no fringe on the burger here, but one of the burger places. And so things they liked about Munster. And so that's really cool to get the kids to participate. Because in the end, you know, planning and zoning are a long-range endeavor. And many of us, you know, who are here, is really about, you know, kids and grandkids for, you know, what they're going to see in Munster. So, so that's important to get those future generations in. We, on the dot maps that people did during the workshop, they also made notes about, you know, things that were, the dots that they put on here. A lot of people said there's a traffic nightmare here. You can imagine there's no parking there, traffic and parking design issues. Great community park. This is underdeveloped, and the golf greens and amphitheater were exciting to people. People love this facility, obviously. And so you start to just identify the things that people are, you know, really loving, areas where they want to see things change, maybe, or opportunities for new growth and development. So here's some of the comments that we got. Community park is great, nice dog park at Centennial, great schools, fitness point, nice campus facility, pleasant neighborhoods, great medical facilities, and the library is super. Those are the things people like the most. There's a lot of opportunities here. People saw turning lanes needed on Calumet, more grocery shopping, new business tech, better design of buildings in many locations, expanding the parks and green spaces, new park equipment is needed, transit line will be helpful, underdeveloped areas have potential, sidewalks needed in various locations, new buildings should have a cohesive look, and sustainability measures like solar, energy efficiency, buildings, et cetera, should be included. Now, noted that many of these things have nothing to do with zoning. So we wanted to show you which things zoning can actually start to impact. And so when you start to ask people, you know, what do you think, what do you want to see, a lot of things come up. You know, we don't want to limit people by saying what things that zoning can do for you, you know, are you interested in? So we wanted to pull some of this out. Some of these other things start to be, you know, sort of tangentially related to zoning. So for instance, new tech business, there, you know, you simply make sure that those types of uses are allowed in different areas, or, you know, the type of character that you create in a place based on the zoning is conducive to that, but it's not necessarily specifically about the zoning. So the red dots were areas that needed improvement. People talked about traffic issues along Calumet, lack of sidewalks to connect the bike paths in some locations, safe routes to school, development town hall area, community park, too many ballparks, they said. I don't know if many people said that one, but we did hear that. Crowded neighborhoods, Calumet and 30th. Some intersections are difficult for pedestrians, too much parking in certain areas. We also heard there's not enough parking in other areas. So. Visual improvements in several areas, improve walkability, and create a walkable downtown. So we heard a lot of things, and here's some things that are related specifically to zoning, like developing a town hall area, creating a walkable downtown, etc. So one of the things that we're going to be doing is focusing on modernizing your zoning ordinance, because right now it's very outdated. You haven't updated it since like 1985. with a big update. And so the way that we think about zoning these days isn't necessarily like they used to think about zoning, which was separating one use from the next. We think about zoning based on the experience and the feeling, the character of a certain area that you're in town. And so just a simple framework is set up to describe this diagram shows. We think about, the way that people always built towns up until, the 40s, 50s. The way it worked was there was sort of the natural zone at the edge where you had nature, woodlands, etc. And then as you moved in, it became a little bit more like farms, agricultural. You start seeing some human habitation going on here. Then moving closer into town, you end up with a suburban zone, which was larger houses on larger lots set back farther from the street. Then you move into the next area, which would be starting to get a little bit more dense. You start to see maybe some row houses or some convenience like corner stores, people living above a shop, that kind of thing, but also still some detached single-family houses, maybe on a smaller lot, a little closer to the street. And then, you get even into the heart of the core of a downtown area, which might be, all attached, sort of mixed-use buildings and, a proper downtown. So somewhere along the way, communities, after World War, once automobiles became more prevalent, people stopped building towns like this, and they started focusing on sort of, hey, this is great, we have these cars now, let's drive everywhere, and we'll make our whole community around cars. And so what we're finding in every community that we work in is that they want to really start to move away from that in certain areas of the community and really start to define areas that can be more pedestrian friendly, not that they're not welcoming to cars and not that they don't provide parking and all the things that cars need, but cars aren't the most important thing in that area. And we see many communities like this, and we hear comments like we've heard here about communities that don't have a center, an identifiable core. When I ask the question to somebody, when you bring people from out of town to come visit you, what do you take them to go see? And they say, oh, we have a lovely park over there. Or we have there's the woodland, or whatever the case may be, and they don't actually talk about a built place. That's a place that I know doesn't really have a core or the heart of the community. And so nearly every time we hear people say, we'd like to have that. Is it possible to get that now that we're nearly built out? And the answer is yes. You'll see it time and time again around the country. People are creating these new centers, new core part of the community where they never had one. So the way that we do it is we start looking at the zoning, your current zoning, and we start to translate that into these character districts. And some places the character is going to still be auto-oriented. And so it's not necessarily about transforming it all to walkable or mixed use or whatever, but we want to create the opportunity for those things to happen in certain areas. So we do the zoning translation so we can see where you came from and where you're going. And we heard from the community where the centers need to be, and there's actually 4 different locations that were listed. So this is sort of the Main Street area where the potential train stop would be. So that's one of the ones down here. And then there's this area that we're in now, and this map may actually be a little bit biased because this question was asked in the parking lot out there at the farmer's market. So they're like, oh, of course this, and also because it is identifiable, you have this wonderful facility and all of that. And so then you also see this is the intersection of Ridge Road and Calumet right here with all of these dots. And then this is the other location for the northern most train station potential. So that's kind of how those centers were laid out based on the community's feedback. And you can see I put the little circles around them here. Now, what we've been thinking about is, how do you start to think of it from a planning perspective and then sort of translate that into zoning? What makes a lot of sense is since you've already started working, you have this facility, you're starting to work on the village here, that becomes a great center. And then up here to the north, at the intersection of Ridge and Calumet, there's a way, and it'll be hard for you to think about because you're so used to seeing it as it is, to start to create and to transform that into sort of a little downtown, if you will, like a lot of the adjacent and neighboring communities. And then over at the train station, if that actually happens, then that becomes its own little node. And then once you, like this strip of road here between the two actually becomes your main street. So you have sort of the heart, the main street, and then the new node for the transit. And so that can work really well to start to make a sort of a different image of the town as we move into the future. So the thing that we know is, again, though, a lot of traffic goes through there. We've heard about it time and again. And what we've talked about is there's two types of traffic. There's all of you, and there's all the people who live from elsewhere that are just driving through here. And so the traffic that you're actually hating is really that traffic that's just breezing through. They're never stopping. They're not stopping to buy anything, to put any tax money here. They're not actually benefiting you in any way. And so what we find is that many communities say, you know what? One of the things that we can do is start to make it less convenient for people just to fly through here. And then they'll find other ways, and then the traffic problem actually starts to dissipate so the people who live here can use these roads. And by the way, not only do we actually help our traffic problem, we actually create the place that we're talking about needing and wanting. And so it seems counterintuitive to start to do that. But the more you learn about it and the more we go through this process together in the future, the more we can think about how to do that. Now, that said too, there's a number of opportunities sort of regionally where you can start to connect some of these other roads and different things you can do on a sort of a bigger picture scale that can solve the traffic problems that you have also. And so you can not only make it less convenient for people to go right through the heart of your community, but you can give them better and easier ways. So why would they, And so that's something to think about. Now, why would they? Because we want to go to the heart of Munster and go shop and visit and do all of these great things. And so now you're actually getting them to stop instead of just whiz through as they go. So in the kickoff, in a couple months ago, we asked, hey, if you had new development, where would you like to go? What are examples in the region that you'd like it to be like? And so we got this whole list of places. And so Becky got in the car and she drove all around. So we went to Highland and Crown Point and Valparaiso, and East Chicago, Whiting, Orland Park, Frankfurt, and Naperville. And so, there's many other places that people thought were great, but these were some of the ones that we heard over and over. And so we started to try to understand what it is about these places that people thought were really great. And so, you can start to see it's just, the classic downtown, the classic little Main Street. Even on a cloudy day, it still looks nice. And, what we always hear too is people say, I don't want to be like that place. I want to be Munster. Exactly. But what are the lessons that we can learn from these other places and start to see, they did this thing right. There's this thing that doesn't feel like us, or this thing that, they could have done better, or what the Munster version of all these things. So a lot of times we hear that kind of comment. So here, this is, if you haven't been down to Orland Park, this is their TOD. So they're actually, their train station, and they did this new development around it and all that. And, some will say, well, that doesn't feel very Munster to me. And so, a lot of that is architecture, a lot of that is scale and massing, have that feel, what is this place? But what you can't dispute is, especially as this continues to develop and grow, this is a real place. It's a very clear center. There's a civic space out here. People can go out and play. People live up here. It's really nice as far as the new development goes. And then also, not only did Becky just drive around, but she also got out and measured things and started to understand, what is the DNA of these places that people said were great. So we know that on-street parking is about 8 feet, and driving lanes are 12 feet there. The height of the stores is this. I particularly like this one. This is my predecessor's being Wrights here. Made so that's my last name, right? And then even getting a little bit more analytical, looking at on the aerial photo, the block dimensions and the lot depths and how big are the buildings. And we really want to make sure that nothing that we're doing is arbitrary. Somebody says, well, why did you set these standards in the zoning? We say, oh, well, because these places that people talked about were like this, or in the existing neighborhoods, if people don't want to see anything change, we said, oh, well, we actually fixed some of the zoning issues that we saw there that were not allow people to build back houses that were keeping with the next door neighbors. So really went around and understood all these. Now, so this is one thing that's very interesting. Saratoga Springs is nowhere near here, and Becky did not drive there, but it's in New York, and we were there recently. And the thing that you may notice in Saratoga Springs is this is their downtown. And you see what runs right through their downtown? A 4-lane road with tractor trailers going through, on-street parking, sidewalks, street trees, there's actually people there, there's shops, they're all pulled up close to the street, there's these wonderful sidewalks. This is one of the most beautiful main streets that I've ever seen. And this is, from this angle, it's hard to tell, but we wanted to show you the cross-section of this road as it goes through there. It's really, really beautiful. And this is a bad picture of it, but it's, look at this, 50 people around here. Can you imagine that many people walking along the side of Ridge Road or Calumet? Not today. And so people say, well, there's no one walking there. Why would we, make it a nice street? Well, they're not walking there because it's not a nice street, right? We saw somebody walking in front of the Chipotle, and they were in the street. And I was like, there's a sidewalk right there, right next to you, And so I don't understand what was going on there, but it was very interesting. But look at this, how much traffic goes through here. This is a regional, like a state highway that goes right through downtown. So this is really important to think about as you imagine if you just had a picture of what your roads look like compared to that. A little different. So as we started looking at the neighborhoods, we started to envision what the different character districts look like. So CD stands for character district. So this is a CD3 neighborhood. So just single family houses, set back from the street with sidewalks and street trees, and pretty straightforward. And then we took some of your existing zones. So this might be for streets that you already have right now. We didn't want to rezone everything, so this is CD3 R1, which is one of your current zones. And so 70-foot lot, single family residence, pretty recognizable. In this version, there aren't any sidewalks. Some of the neighborhoods we've heard people like it like that. Others we've heard, hey, can we add sidewalks to our neighborhood? So that's not necessarily a zoning question, but just pointing out the difference. So then here's a similar version. It's a 60-foot wide lot. So this is CD3 R2, and you see there's certain neighborhoods that have these cute little houses that are like that, little smaller lots. So we want to make sure that the design reflects that. Then we have CD3 R3, which would be 60-foot 1 and 2 family residences. So you have a lot of these little duplexes and single family houses in these zones. That's really nice. And then we look at CD4A, general urban. So this would be like that where you start to have like a corner store, maybe a few row houses, some detached single family houses on smaller lots. But you can, we've heard about the little store. So this is like the exuberant version of a little store where somebody could live above, and pretty neat. Imagine having a little neighborhood cafe. You can just walk down the street and enjoy. And then here's another version of that that might occur along some of the more large streets there. So this would be sort of a main street kind of condition of a CD4A. This is not in this version. You're not seeing detached single family houses or row houses. These are all primarily live work building where somebody can live above their shop, or mixed use buildings. But again, lively streetscape here, people out. And then we have a CD4R, which is one of your zones now, multifamily. So this would be some of these apartment houses and row houses would be in this zone. So it's not, some pretty awesome little apartment houses. And then we have this CD4B, which is a zone that is a derivative of the CD4, but it allows a little bit more flexibility in the different things that you can do there. So this would be really kind of cool, fun kind of place to be. A little bit more loose on some of the standards there, but a lot of neat stuff. And then the 5 urban center, and this would be kind of the most dense areas as well. And you can start to see sort of the wider cross section here, 4 lanes across, median, on-street parking. So if you can imagine, this would be some of your bigger roads that happen now. Where the heck is the parking? So the parking is in the rear. So you have alleys and rear lanes like you do in some of these other downtowns. And what we also know is that in some of the on some of the lots along these bigger streets, they are they're really shallow, and there's detached single-family houses right behind them. So you have issues where it's difficult to find enough parking to include in some of those areas. And we see that in a lot of communities that we work in as well. So that has to be sorted out as we go forward. We have another one called the Civic Zone. This is not here, by the way. This is not our proposal for your downtown area or your heart of your community. But this is wanted to just show you, you know, when you have a large civic space like this, a large park or something, it would get its own zone, a civic zone, so it's protected from development in the future. Now, there's a thing that we do in communities like this that are primarily auto-oriented in their development over the time, and we think about transforming and thinking about different auto-oriented uses in a different way. So we call this gas backwards. So here's the street here. So this is actually the front of buildings. So this is a gas station on the corner. So the convenience part of the gas station is we pull up at the corner, the pumps are in the back, you drive through, circulate, you go out that way. There's parking back here for the shops and people who live above the shops or offices, whatnot. And so this is a way that you continue on with this auto-oriented use, but you're still able to imagine that your some of your streets, if you want to make it feel more walkable, could have something like this on them. Here's a version that is a bank. Same kind of thing, you come through, here's the bank tellers back here, you go out. Here's a version that is a pharmacy. And so on the corner back here, there's the drive-through, you can't see it, but the building's set up. So you go through there. And then lastly, a restaurant. So, you know, you can imagine that this is, you know, whatever, McDonald's, come through, go out. And so you have this whole series of things where you think like, well, that's auto-oriented, how do we do that? And so with a lot, you know, of forethought and planning and you know, intentional design, you actually can solve some of the problems. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've heard about the Dunkin' Donuts, you know, Dunkin' Donuts and the cars back up onto the road and all this stuff. And so, you know, you can actually start to solve some of these problems in for your place and process. Now, those are smaller sort of businesses. What about the bigger businesses? So here you start to see, maybe this is a regional grocery store or something, some sort of a medium or bigger box. A lot of times there's, you know, underutilized property, we call it. So you start to see some development occur here, and maybe some comes in there, some comes in there, and then maybe someday it actually totally transforms when we stop shipping things all across the country in big trucks and things. And so now you have a nice little walkable village where there once was just a, you know, sort of a medium box. Now, you may say, where does the parking go? What we find is, one, there's usually too much parking. So the first phase or two is no problem. And then as you move forward, once real estate values are, you know, sort of the market is there, if you will, to start to make this kind of transformation, and you start to see, you know, maybe a parking structure that would go in here, get an extra level of parking. Some of that kind of stuff can happen if you move forward. And then here's an example of, you know, a community where they wanted to create a downtown and they had no parking center. There was a gas station on the corner. There's some sort of a, you know, Eiffel Tower replica here, I think a cell tower or something right in the heart of their town. There are these great little neighborhood streets that come right up to this corridor here, and then this is their big sort of town park. And so we showed them how they could start to transform that. This is the after. So here's their new part of their community. The gas station, you know, relocated in somewhere that is a better spot for a gas station, or could be back here's a gas backwards. Here's a new library that they were looking at, and a civic pavilion, and proper entrance now to their park through here, and the corridor is transformed. And you can imagine just the way, the difference that this feels in that community. And here they had, you know, sort of a different corridor where they said, you know, we'd like to, they had all these goals. They want to be more walkable and bikeable and have these new, you know, opportunities for mixed-use buildings. And they said, we really don't like this corridor in our community. What can we do? And so we showed them how to transform from the before to the after. You know, same width of the street. Now we have bike facilities and on-street parking, and cars can drive through, and people can walk. And, you know, it's pretty startling the difference there. Now, all that said, you know, I just showed you a bunch of you know, dreamy things for the future besides the character districts. That stuff's pretty straightforward, but the more the creating the center and all of that is a different and more of a long-term endeavor. It takes cooperation and coordination with the municipality, the business owners, et cetera. But the thing that's interesting is when you start to set the zoning in place that can allow this to happen, people start to, you know, one person will do it. They'll take the first step and they'll say, I'm going to move my building up and I'm going to do this, you know, and it's like, oh wow, look how great that looks, look how successful that is, and then the next person wants to do it, next person. And so it's a little bit of a challenging coordination to start to like link up parking lots and those sorts of things. But the one advantage that you have here over a lot of communities is that you have an amazing staff and the people that work here are really, really thinkers. And so they're actually looking, how can we make things happen? What can we do that's really going to make the goals of the community actually become a reality? And so I definitely think that you all can do it with all the people you have in place here. It's wonderful. Even if Dustin always has on a funny hat, I call it his thinking cap. He's always thinking about something, so he's a good one to have. So timelines, and by the way, I like your hats, they're funny. Timeline and next steps. Right now, we're here. So this is the Planapalooza. This is the end of the beginning of the project, and so now we're going to continue on to move through this process with you. We're going to be working on, when we leave here, a client review draft. We're going to send it to Tom and Dustin to look at and make sure we haven't done anything nutty before you guys see it. And by that I mean write the wrong name of the town in the code or something like that. But really what we want to do is have you all be able to take a look at it before it starts getting edited and changed, because really, again, it's your code, and so it's important to have that level of transparency. So that client review draft will come out sometime in November, hopefully, and then they'll take a look at it. They'll give us some quick comments. We'll turn it around, and we'll get the public review draft out in February, and then have the actual official adoption process begin sometime March, April, and then during that process, you'll still have a whole nother opportunity to come and give comment, and during the official public hearings. And so all that we're doing now, all the things we've done before, and this, and the steps will come after this, we're all really just extra, to give you extra opportunities to give input. Because so many times we'll see communities will come up with a new master plan or a zoning ordinance or whatever, and the first time you see it is when they release a draft that you're going to look at just before it goes to the public hearing. So we really want you all to feel like this is part of your process. So this is our draft color right now, so it's pretty exciting to start to see it come together. So we'll be working on the zoning maps. We'll be working on figuring out the metrics and the standards within the character districts. We'll be figuring out what kind of building types and frontage types you guys are going to have. And the client draft, all these things I just told you. So you need to stay involved and be connected. There's the town webpage has done a great job of keeping up with everything that's going on and giving information. Like this afternoon when I was in my hotel room wondering if I was going to make it out to the presentation, and I was like, what time is that presentation again? And I went on the webpage and it was the first thing, Planapalooza at 7 o'clock. So that was great. There's a Twitter feed if you're a Twitterer, and a Facebook page as well if you're a Facebooker. So now we can turn the lights on, just talk and get a little input. Turn the lights on. All right, who has some thoughts? Who's first? You in the black walking towards the door.
Good job, good job.
Okay, great.
I
Thanks.
like it,
Yes.
more to come. Yeah,
Awesome.
thank you so much.
Perfect. Good. What else? Anybody else? Yes.
Would it matter to know for sure if the trains get approved or not before we make a decision? Because that would, if it's approved, that would design it one way. If it's not approved, it'd be slightly different.
Yeah, so that's a good question, actually. I think that the location of the train is, both of the spots where they're talking about having stop, it makes sense, even just thinking about it from a planning perspective, if you didn't have a station there, it still could be great to have those two ends, the Calumet Ridge as one, and then the other is the anchor kind of along the trail there, and the main street in between. So, when we talked with the train people and the regional planning people, I said, so are we having a train or not? And they said, well, yes, and I said, so what you're saying is, unless something unforeseen happens, we're going to have train stations here. And they said, yes. So, I'm not sure what the timing is on all of that, but what I got from them was it's seems to be a foregone conclusion unless something dramatic happens. Now, there's two ways you could do it. You could say, well, let's wait and see if we're going to get to the train station, or you could say, let's make sure we're prepared when that happens and go ahead and get our zoning in place to facilitate the type of development we want. Because what could happen is you end up with development occurring there that's not in keeping with the vision of the train station, and you're thinking like, why did we allow this thing to happen there? One of the other things I heard was, I've heard two types of things. My Uber driver on the way over here tonight actually lives a block away from the northernmost train station location. And I said, what do you think about that? And he said, I'm pretty excited about it. The idea, I think he works in the city, so the idea of being able to hop on the train is pretty exciting to him. And even just for, just going to the city for fun, not just for work. And he said, I know a lot of my neighbors are concerned. I said, I know, I met them. One person said, I'm moving. I'm moving before all this happens. And I said, well, my advice to you is if you want to move and don't want to be near the train station, wait until we're done and your property value goes up. Because right now, you just sell for single family house price, or if you are zoned in a transit or development zoning district, which allows for mixed use or whatever the case may be, more density. And I know density is a bad word here, but let's call it intensity. Then your property value is worth a lot more. I know a lot of people live there for a long time, and so there's sentimental value as well, and just the disruption of it. And I know there was concern about the process, about how the decisions were made, and all of that. That people didn't feel like it was very transparent, and I wish maybe that had been different. But in the end, that's my advice: is either stick around and enjoy it, or if it happens and you just can't bear it, just wait long enough till you can really, capitalize on that added value. This, can you all hear me in the back?
Yeah.
If I'm talking like this, do I have to hold up like that? I feel like a wrestling announcer with help. I can hear myself. Yes.
All right, I just have a question. One, I like the idea of making Ridge Road kind of the main street, slowing it down a little bit, whether it's, on-street parking, making it more like maybe downtown Lansing, something like that. And I'm kind of in favor of maybe some of the more older zoning, to stick to like Centennial Village or maybe Main Street where a potential train may go down there. But back to Main and kind of that, we were talking about like the backwards gas station. Like, what are some of those challenges? Because let's say you went, the BP on the corner of Calumet Ridge, how would you go about that to say, we want you to move your building to the front, like to the corner, to do that? Because, with existing, I guess, retail or whatever, it might be a little tougher than actually building something or creating something new.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so what we find is it all comes down to two things. One is a matter of time, because at some point, every gas station, we just had one where I live, gas station's been there not too long, it was a decent gas station. All of a sudden it's like, oh wow, they're gonna redo the gas station, spruce it up. Well, they didn't just spruce it up, they tore it down and built a new one right in the same spot. Wow, okay. And so when that happens, that investment is going to occur anyway. The question is, where does the convenience store go here or there? The other thing is too, when you start to see, let's say you own the property that the gas station is on, and we've heard many times that the retailer or commercial use is required to have more parking than they need. So all of a sudden now they're saying like, oh wow, we don't have to have quite as much parking, or we can do something more with that land. It's money, and so it starts to be the market decides. Right now the idea would be, just like you all currently have it, is that if something is a certain way, until they do something with it, they don't have to come into compliance. So no one's going to be forced to do something right away. But if you're right there on the corner in the main intersection, and now it's zoned a new way and the property is a lot more valuable, all of a sudden you start thinking like, okay, wow, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. So. Who else? Yes.
I have a couple of things that came to mind when I was watching this For those of us who kind of live in the rural areas, close to some of the indicated downtown, potential downtown.
Sure.
There's a concern, I think, that the new development will back right up to homes, and how much of a buffer is there between new development and parking and the extra noise of more development. We just had across the street from us a church put in new air conditioning in, and that unit is noisier. And so you get these bigger buildings, they require bigger units to cool them. And if those are right up against the neighborhoods, then are those neighborhoods going to kind of dwindle as rezoning happens around them?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a concern that I want to share.
Yeah, so I'll repeat it as best I can for the people at home. So the question was, what about, when new development occurs adjacent to existing residential neighborhoods and the disruption of, noise, new air conditioning, that type of thing. And, just honestly, that's one of the concerns that always comes up, like how do you solve that? And I think that, as we go through this process and as development proposals come in, I think it's going to be important to have that, kind of on the list of things to do. It's one thing if you're developing, greenfield development, there's no one nearby, you don't have to be quite as careful, if you will. But when you have this close proximity that we have in a lot of locations around here, it's going to be important for the developers to really think through that and kind of have their feet held to the fire. What we found is, and I didn't mention this a minute ago, is that on the, and I don't know if you're on the north or south of the ridge, but the south side of the ridge actually has much deeper lots on the along the road there, which lends itself more easily to some of the development, larger scale, not necessarily big, but just kind of a new development. Along the north side, it's much sort of thinner and more difficult to sort it out. But we actually took I wish we'd shown you guys this. We took an aerial photograph of what station was it? Orland Park Station. And there's a parking garage, and it's hidden inside the block where the apartments are in, or whatever it is, condos, mixed use on the ground floor maybe. And we took that whole building, that whole block, and superimposed it, and it actually fit in one of the lots on the south side of the Ridge Road on the corner there, which I was surprised at the scale of it. It seemed like it was bigger than the lot, but it worked. And so I think that on the north side it's going to be really tricky. And a lot of times what happens is the ones that are more immediately adjacent, well, two things. One is they're more valuable, but they're also more impacted by the new development. And so they tend to be the ones who people say, hey, I was actually thinking about retiring to Nashville, coming down where you live, Ryan, so let's do that. I'll get away from the winter, go ahead and cash in. And again, not everybody will want to do that, but that's the kind of thing that you see happen. And some people will say, some of the houses that maybe don't change or aren't sold, they'll actually become more valuable anyway, because there are a certain group of people who, believe it or not, like air conditioning noise and delivery trucks and all of that stuff. And they're like, wow, I can now walk right around the corner to this new development. That's really exciting for me. But I wanted a single family detached house. So this is perfect. So it's funny because, think about different stages in people's lives. It's like different things are appealing to them. And think about the L in the city. There's some apartments where you can literally stick your arm out the window and you're going to lose it because the train's like right there. You really want to live there. Somebody's excited to live there, So it's tricky as growth and development occur.
Well, you're not gonna, not everybody is gonna be, happy with the rezoning areas.
That's right.
Those who live closer are more impacted, so it affects them more, rather than the south side. So it just, how, and that's the question that we decided is, how far does mixed use zoning, the redevelopment, extend into existing neighborhoods and existing businesses. Because this is all along those areas, well, maybe not so much along Calumet, but along Ridge, it's all developed.
Yeah.
And so this is existing residents and businesses that will feel the impact of this change in the zone.
Right, exactly, yeah,
And
and
I
so,
think that concerns a lot of us. I know things will change, but it's somewhat worrisome because it's hard to know how to plan
exactly.
on a personal level. So,
Yeah.
and one other thing,
Sure.
sorry,
That's okay.
about Ridge Road. Ridge Road goes all the way from Gary into Lansing and, basically at Torrance. And so all these towns share Ridge Road. It doesn't sound very friendly to make it less convenient for people to pass through. I mean, we have to pass through Highlands in Lansing, and they have kind of developed John Lewis, modest downtown area. And so I think, are they gonna make it hard for us because we're not stopping there?
That's a great point.
It's just that, it's part of a larger community.
Sure, and when I say that, make it more difficult, I don't mean like intentionally, like, oh yeah, look, that guy's from the next level, where's the spike strips, But I'm thinking, so some of them have already sort of done something with their version of Ridge Road, and you still go through there. So that's okay, that's good, from a sharing perspective. But what we tend to focus on though is like making it for residents first. And if they want to come through, so that's fine. But also, like I said, there needs to be sort of a larger scale regional thinking about transportation to make sure that, like, why are people going down Ridge Road right now? Well, because that's really the only kind of good way to go. And so once you start making more of those parallel connections regionally, then you actually, it can take the pressure off. And so like for me, when I go home, we have this wonderful historic Main Street, it's well loved around the country. People come there for the weekend, and I go down Main Street because I want to, but I have a number of ways that I could go instead if I also was in a hurry. And so really you can start to give everybody just more choices. So you currently don't, that's right. Exactly. So, yes?
Yeah, I have a question of clarification. So, any suggested zoning change, can you explain a little bit what happens to the existing owner? And then how that works? And then with, the planning efforts, discuss a little bit more about, planning up front versus getting planned on after the fact. I think part of, my understanding was what the exercise there is to have an understanding and plan for the future, not necessarily to change, the existing zoning where people are now, but to look to the future. Munster is not a big place and doesn't have a lot of spots, but it does have its opportunities for development. If you could just provide a clarification of, what happens if the map changes and the ordinance gets done and everything, and you're in the middle of it, and you don't want to do anything about it, what happens?
Yeah, you just keep on doing what you're doing. And that's just, like I said, the existing grandfathering provisions and all that, which are in place, and so you had a lot of value added to your property, and you can choose to capitalize on it, or just keep on doing what you're doing. And so the idea isn't it's funny because, when we talk about making changes and transforming, doing these different things, for us, really, it's about just giving people more choices with what they can do with their property. Because, right now it's pretty limited. The reason why Ridge Road looks like Ridge Road looks and Calumet looks like it looks is because the zoning made it that way. Except for when you look at your zoning map, you guys have tons and tons of planned unit developments, of PUDs. Well, these are all moments where people said, that zoning is not really working for me. I want to do something different or creative or, whatever. And so they come in and write their own zoning. So you have a bunch of different sort of zones that are specific to a certain piece of property. And so, once we see those kind of PUDs happening a lot, we start realizing that the zoning is not really working for people. And we start to see that, as you all are taking steps to do things different and just completely auto-oriented, you're taking these baby steps towards these more walkable, sort of place-based development types. And so you look at, even though people talk about the parking and all that stuff, the, Chipotle and Froyo, that area there, that's, it was sort of thinking towards Main Street. That's what it was sort of envisioning, I think. And so, as we move forward, you start to figure out how all of this works, and that owner, on their own accord says, hey, I want to do something in this property, and it's going to be more like this and less auto centric. And so really the key is to allow people to do more than they currently can. Yeah.
Another follow-up.
Yeah.
So as part of the process that we're looking into the type of materials that go into the zoning areas and what the community we're looking for. And I'm assuming that, the goal would be to promote more sustainable, highly more cost-effective, valuable types of structures as opposed to the usual. And I would, my assumption is that at the end of this, somewhere along the line, it says zoning code or whatever is going to require some types of materials that are going to be specified and some type of setback and some type of green space, and all that would be contemplated so that if and when there's new development or redevelopment, that a developer or a person knows, I want to know how these are the rules now.
Yeah.
And could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. Yeah, a lot of communities we work in want to regulate things like materials. Other places, no, that's not for us. That's the developer to decide. Developers always say, yeah, I like that. Then I can do whatever I want to do. But we also find that in communities that don't specify what they actually want, developers say, can you just tell me what you want instead of beating me up every time I come in for approval? Because that's the process, in most places, and we've heard that that's also, people feel like that's the process here. That, they go through and they don't know exactly what people, when, elected and appointed officials are looking for, so they go back and back and back. And so the idea is to not only modernize the zoning and to allow for this walkable stuff, but also just to make the process more straightforward and less subjective for people looking to do development. And so in the end, it's a win-win because not only do the elected officials not have to stay up till midnight every time you have a hearing, but the developer knows what to expect and the citizens know what to expect. It's not like, are we going to like this development this time or not? Because a lot of times people are fearful of development, they don't like it because sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. So in the end, that's one of those things that tends to be negotiated though. It's like, okay, fine, tell us the list of materials, but and the citizens may want one thing and then the developers want another. Or even a lot of times the design professionals, the architects, they're like, hey, we want to do this cool, rusty metal corrugated thing or, whatever the case may be. And I don't see that on the list. We add it, and all of a sudden the list starts to have everything in it. So we'll work with that all together. So yes, it's a short answer. Yes.
I really like the two nodes along Ridge Road. I think it takes advantage of the potential train station, and also it's really dense around there. So if we want to have people actually walking to things, that's a much more better idea. I just said a comment, you said you liked the Saratoga one, and that was kind of horrifying to me because there's semis and there's trucks, and it's not a place where I would walk. It's not a place where I would sit.
Yeah.
Like Marco's, for instance, is there, and I never go there because it's like traffic and you smell like exhaust. So I like the idea of slowing it down, like Lansing has, it's 2 lanes. And if it's just that little stretch, it's not going to impact our neighbors too much.
Sure.
And they'll find other ways around, especially with the realignment of 45th to go big and east-west better.
Yeah, a lot of communities are doing this. It's called a road diet. They say, well, yeah, there's 4 lanes now, and yeah, it's full of traffic. But in fact, we're going to narrow it and go down to 2 lanes and have on-street parking and create this wonderful place. Now, I will say in defense of Saratoga Springs, you must go there and visit it because it's funny. When you go to Saratoga Springs, as you saw in the photograph, there are just people walking everywhere. It's great. And the tractor trailers are, few and far between, but I like that picture because it had one and really just made the point that even the neighbors can still get by with their tractor trailers. But the cars that you see driving through Saratoga Springs are like Ferraris and, you know, Mercedes and all this stuff, because it's such a wonderful place that people, you know, like the Sultan of Dubai has a condo in downtown Saratoga Springs, or whatever, I don't know why. But it's beautiful, and so these places that are, you know, really special, even if, the point was, even if it's a 4-lane highway, it can be really spectacular compared to a conventional 4-lane highway. Not that you want Ferraris and Lamborghinis driving around here, but it happens sometimes in cool places.
Yeah, it doesn't encourage walking, hiking.
The 18 wheelers, yeah. Right. Yeah, no, and on our main street that is so loved, there's a Starbucks in the corner in a cool building. And you're sitting outside, and I keep thinking, like, surely there's a better way to make the truck route, because there'll be a semi truck pull up and idling, and you're like, hold that thought, wait till the light changes, and then the truck leaves, and then you can continue to talk. So I know what you mean. So, who else?
Right.
Yes.
We've got a Dunkin' Donuts, and then we decided to put another one like 2 miles away.
Yeah.
What is that?
Well, Dunkin' Donuts likes to make a lot of money.
I guess.
You know, all restaurants do, which is great, and I think, you know, you'll see that in a lot of places, you know.
Is that right?
On one side of the street and on the other side of the street, because the traffic going this way and that way.
So we are anywhere USA.
I don't know. Yeah.
Doesn't the town, can't they, so that the town, I guess the officials had to approve of 1 Dunkin' Donuts, 16 Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah.
So should there be something that says, okay, we can have 1 Jewel, we can have 1 Dunkin' Donuts, we have Munster Donuts, I mean, I'm a big Munster Donut fan.
Yes, we had
So
Munster
don't
Donuts this
need-
week.
I mean, why don't the people in the town says, okay, let's stay with, like, say, Munster Donut. It's a local donut, it's been here forever, there are people there, but no, let's invite all these other, or let's have 6 McDonald's. We have, you know, what, do we need McDonald's or Wendy's? I mean, can we be more selective? And is that the job of the people that, don't they have to approve? If I'm Dunkin' Donuts, I would have to approve to go in, and somebody would say, well, no, we already have 1, we don't need another one.
Yeah, now see
Just money talks?
well, you vote with your dollars. And so the only way that you can control that legally, is to not buy Dunkin' Donuts. And then they'll only have 1.
The people that are in charge don't decide who comes in and who doesn't.
No, you can't. I don't believe you can. Our attorney here is still, you can't discriminate based on the business. And, you know, you can do things that, you know, you can set higher standards and requirements that a lot of times don't work great for franchises. You know, here's the way franchises work if you don't know. So the franchise has their sort of book of plans. This is our Dunkin' Donut prototype for, you know, 2018. And oh, look, there's a site and it fits there, boom. And, you know, this is a suburban community, so we'll put that one here, we'll put that one there. And in the, you know, places that have these downtowns and that kind of stuff, like my Starbucks, I was saying, it's in this historic building, or, you know, this cool mixed use building, and we didn't get the normal Starbucks that's out on the highway. Because that place was set up and the rules were, and they wanted to be there, they had to follow those rules. And so they could have said, well, that's too rigorous for us. We don't want to follow those rules, so we're not going to put more than 1 Starbucks, and we'll only put it on the highway. Now, when you ask, you know, somebody who's in charge of economic development, they may say, well, I don't know how I feel about that, you know, because my job is to bring in more business, more tax dollars or whatever, and now we're, you know, sort of sending people to the next town over, and you guys are the beneficiary of that. You know, all the people, you know, businesses want to be just over the line, you know, here out of Illinois. And so, no is the short answer. We can't control it. Like I said, you vote with your dollars, but we can make sure that if you're going to get one, that it's going to be in the character that you want it to be, and it's not going to cause parking problems and, you know, traffic problems and whatever. Yes.
Just a comment, looking at some of your pictures, many of the towns that you indicated were towns that really existed with the core structures and a number of different buildings, one right next to it, the other, that's the way they used to build them.
Yeah.
And they've kept them up and remodeled them and so forth, so they have that look of a walk on the street kind of. Munster does not have that right now. And I think it's going to be just an unbelievable transition if they try to make that the look that they want to have with all the existing structures that can envision being changed, whether it's a bank, whether it's, and the setback have varied over time. Some allow them to be parked or building right on the lot line, and others all had to have setbacks.
Right.
So the PUD that's just developed here on Calumet was a little bit of a shock because, I expected to see setbacks and it's PUD, so they can do whatever they wanted to within limits.
Yeah.
But the transition to amalgamate that into a whether it's 20, 30 years out, it's still going to be a major impact. And again, when you have the business zones next to residential zones, somehow I would think there need to be some kind of buffer in between from the noise, traffic, light, even in the town now, the large parking areas that the lights that are now flooding into homes and into somebody blinding into their parking lots. Those kind of things I think need to be looked at real carefully when you're developing this zoning plan.
Yeah, no, those are all great points. It's definitely not easy to do it, for sure. It happens incrementally over time. The thing that's funny, the concerns about the new mixed-use development next to houses, when you look at, I'll just use our Main Street again as an example. My Main Street, it's mixed use, wonderful, walkable, and then like right behind it, there are single-family houses, and they're like, $1 million. They're like the most expensive houses in town. And you think like, how is that possible? There's trucks and things and deliveries and all the people and all of that stuff. But again, it's a self-selecting, group of people who think that's wonderful. And there's no buffers.
They have no choice.
Yeah. No,
I mean, the choice is the concern. I mean, because there's a lot of residents in town that enjoy their more or less privacy, even though they're near commercial. There's limits to how much, if you want to put it all, the storefronts on the street, and that means the parking and the noise and is more next to the resident area than is generally accepted in Munster. Munster is different than Lansing or in Highland, for that matter. So,
sure.
So it's going to be a big concern.
I like the idea that Munster's doing this for the town because it's really needed. You see all these chopped up developments and doesn't really have a grand plan. So I understand you're going to set a set of regulations for builders and developers that's hopefully going to result in a more better environment for the people that live there when the buildings are done. Can you take a few minutes and explain where the money's going to come from to do all this development and how much of the money will have to come from the town to get what they want? In other words, are you going to have to put, or is the town going to have to put rules with this development idea, development regulations, that forces developers to contribute to a central park if they're going to be anywhere near where you kind of plan the central park? And are they able to get money from the government or somewhere that keeps the money outside of Munster having to, basically fund it?
Yeah.
Because I can see this being a wonderful idea, but also maybe taking a long, long time to get what you want. So a lot of us in this room are going to be around when this happens.
Right.
But I'd just like to hear, based on all the other maybe planning that you've done and others, where does the money actually come from for something?
Yeah. That's probably the most common question asked when we're planning or zoning.
Uh-huh.
Who's going to pay for it, right? And the thing about the zoning is that what we're doing is actually for the private property, right? And so, because the town can't zone itself, right? And so what we're doing is for the private property, so all the new development would be, on the developer to put that in. Now, the question about putting a fund in for the central park, if you will. So that's the one part of this where if you're trying to make a civic space, that's the heart. That is something that a municipality would typically, be involved in, just like you would make a new park anywhere. So it happens to be, we want our new park to be right here. This is what we call the center. And then the town has to figure out how to work with developers. Sometimes it's public-private partnership. Sometimes it's sort of a, depending on the state, you'll have like an impact fee, those kinds of things for developers. So there's a number of ways to do it. The other part of it is that would be something for the town to be involved in and sort of contributing to is not only will you have great new development adjacent to the road, but within the right of way, you also want it to be great too. Now I was looking at the Chipotle. Is there a name for that development? Does it have a name? Oh, you guys are Chipotle Froyo, right? So that place, there's a lot of landscaping and sidewalk and stuff out there, and I was actually wondering if they're right today. I wonder if the town did that or if that was the developer who did it. And so, yeah.
Brian, I believe it's called Munster Shops.
Munster Shops.
And they paid for all that.
Okay, so they did that themselves. So they made those streetscape improvements along their development, is what we think. And that's kind of, the way it goes. In some communities, just like, you'll see a lot of times where they want to encourage like an industrial park or something to go in, they'll put in some infrastructure, sort of the main road and some, pipes and whatever, and people plug into that. So a lot of times the community would be, doing that as an economic development tool or beautification tool. But the bulk of kind of the good stuff that you see in these places is for the developer to do. Okay. Yeah. Anybody else? Yes.
Points that I wanted to ask about. I like the rough presentation of the downtown look, etc. But in your slides, you mentioned a few times that the traffic is probably something that code will deal with. But then you also mentioned a road eye, or redevelopments in the streets to be slower, more walkable. So which is it? Is it the code doesn't handle that part, or will the code be able to change, say, the characteristics of the bridge to where maybe it is 4 lanes with a bike path and a recessed walkway, etc.?
Yeah, so it wouldn't be the zoning that would impact the ridge itself, the design of that road. It could be something that's done in conjunction with new development as part of the town wants to, sort of do it all, get the whole package. There are places that, really just focus on letting the private development side change that, and then some, hey, it's time to redo the road, the timing's right, let's do it. Now it's time to add this and that, or, narrow or whatever. And one of the things that I've talked to about several times during this process is, the need to maybe start to think about a transportation master plan, that thinks through all this and, starts to make some of those bigger plans and figure out how we can make some of these additional connections of these other roads and what specifically you would do on Ridge or Calumet to change the road itself. But it's not dependent on it to make the great walkable place. I mean, if you don't have sidewalks, then yeah, you need those sidewalks. And they may need to, not be quite so skinny, or if like a lot of places we'll see they put in sidewalks along their suburban strip highways, but it's like right next to the driving lane, travel lane, and it's not a very comfortable place to walk. Every time a car goes by, you kind of flinch. Yeah, and so I think there's some greenery there, maybe, I can't remember, but typically you want to have, street trees, then the sidewalk, and even on parked cars, street trees, sidewalk, building, that's kind of the best scenario. So I think there's more study to be done on that, but that's not specific to the zoning.
The reason that I ask is if this development, this change is supposed to be attracting more population from Chicago, the train is a great tool to get there, but eventually we all do drive. If it's gonna take me an hour to get from one side of my town to the other, to slow it down to avoid others coming here,
Yeah.
I don't know that there's gonna be a draw or appeal, but that's what we're locking ourselves.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. That wouldn't be a successful outcome. An hour. How long do you get across town now?
It's a half hour from one side to the other.
Yeah, half an hour? You need to work on that. Yeah. No, I agree with you.
You know, the main street's meant to extend into Illinois through Joel Road and then the Dagger Road, which is 2 miles to the expressway through there before.
Main Street went on to, yeah,
Well, it's not built yet, but it is.
yeah. No, I think those kind of things help, for sure. Because right now, Main Street just dead end, right?
It's not built, but
Was it ever, why is it called Main Street, by the way? Is it someone else's Main Street that just came over here, or?
Main Street.
Aha, okay.
Really?
Got it, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Brian, you also mentioned that in terms of traffic itself, some of the biggest problems that we see here is that it's not how big the road is that's there, is that there are only certain ways you can get to those roads. So your connections are cut off at everything. We were looking at a map of the town, and the number of cul-de-sacs that are in this town is phenomenal compared to most places.
And when it comes to traffic, he doesn't mean phenomenal in a good way.
Yeah, right. So you don't have but like one way in and out sometimes. Massive traffic problems if you don't have alternate routes.
Yeah, truly a long range transportation plan would start to look at some of the existing neighborhoods that when they were put in during sort of this heyday of suburban thinking, oh, we'll just make, essentially the whole neighborhood is one giant cul-de-sac. Even there's streets in it, it all comes out and dumps in this one spot on the road. And some communities are going so far as to say, you know what, when that house right there at the end of the street comes available, we should buy that house and we should connect that street because, the people are complaining about traffic and people don't realize it's the form of our town that we live in and our neighborhoods that are causing this problem. It's all the curb cuts that you have, for instance, along these main roads, all the people who need to turn in and out. And so if you had, something that was much more consolidated, we could go on and on about transportation and how to fix some of your issues here, but it definitely is the form of that you guys developed. And when you look south, you get, the northern part of town is pretty well connected. And, if you haven't looked at it, when you go into town hall next time, right when you walk in the front door, turn to the right. There's this amazing map. It was the plan for the town in 1938. And every road was drawn, and it was like all this amazing parks and all connected. There were a few cul-de-sacs here and there because it was when they first started thinking about it. But in general, the connectivity from north to south and east to west was unbelievable. It's beautiful, and most towns don't have a great plan like that. Only a fraction of it was implemented. Like the far northwest part of town is the only sort of part where it actually happened. But if you had followed that plan and hadn't moved into the suburban mindset, you wouldn't have all this traffic for what it's worth. So, yes.
Brian, did you cover a little more on PUDs? I'm a little confused in what you're saying and how you plan on setting up a master zone so that someone that wants to develop knows exactly what he's supposed to do, yet it's supposed to fit in a neighborhood, yet it's supposed to not impact traffic. Could you kind of talk about that?
Yeah. So right now the process is if you want to do something outside the zoning, you just apply to do a PUD. And so it's sort of this negotiated, planned unit development. Sorry. It's just like basically make up your own zone for your piece of property. Longer way to say it, but and so it's sometimes used for being creative and doing something exceptional that current zoning doesn't allow. But most often around the country, it's used because I don't like what the zoning says. I don't want to do my own thing, right? And so every time a PUD comes before a community, who knows what it will yield? what the outcome is going to be, you know? It can be cool and it can be not. It can be beneficial to the community or it can be harmful. And so, you know, the elected appointed officials, their role is to sort of make a judgment on whether or not these PUDs are beneficial or not. And through the process, you negotiate and you get stuff and ask for things and all that. And so most communities around the country, when they modernize their zoning ordinance, don't even have the option to do a PUD anymore. You just take that away, because if you have a plan, if you have a vision, if you have zoning that's specific and covers everything, then how creative does somebody need to be? You know, at what point are they really just trying to skirt the zoning? So that's kind of the current thinking about PUDs. You had another follow-up?
Well, I was gonna make a comment. I don't know that I agree with your comments that PUD is a total wide open, do what you want to do here in Munster.
Well, I didn't say here, I just said generally they are.
Well, we're talking about Munster, because the study you're doing is Munster, not the United States. I do concur that it is an opportunity to do some things different than maybe our zoning applies. I don't know if you're familiar with the Three Floyds project.
Yes.
That probably wouldn't fit our standard zoning
That's right.
at all. Some of the things that are being done by the hospitals would not fit our zone. So I guess, again, I'm still having a little bit of consternation with this, that one, it's not a free-for-all in our community. Second of all, we want to have zoning in different parts of the town that are different. But then if someone doesn't want to, is not able to, or they'd like to do something different, the only recourse they have is the Board of Zoning Appeals. Yes? If the PUD is gone.
Right.
And in the BZA, the Board of Zoning Appeals, the only basic time you can get a favorable response is if you can prove a hardship.
Correct.
That's getting to be more difficult.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, would you agree?
Yes.
So what relief does the developer have if we don't have a PUD?
The relief is a better zoning ordinance that allows for things to happen and a clear vision for the future. And so what goes on, and so for instance, you use the Three Floyds example. Three Floyds has a plan, and the current zoning wouldn't have anticipated, couldn't have. Knowing though that, let me show you a picture. So knowing that there are things like Three Floyds in areas where people want to have some more flexibility and do some more interesting things, we actually started drawing this kind of a thing, which has its own character. It still has streetscapes, but you can imagine there's a tank here, and a tank there, it's a distillery, and you know, whatever, these kind of things can. So the thing about a place like Three Floyds is that it's unusual and not anticipated, but it's in an area that has already a certain character. That character is zoned manufacturing, and knowing that there are people who are doing interesting, unusual, and cool things, we go and we look at, okay, well, how are some people dealing with that and allowing for that flexibility to occur into these areas while still having a defined zone that has character, that's giving us the community, the streetscape, or whatever the kind of place that we want, and still allows for, you know, interesting things like Three Floyds. And so you write a zone that has that kind of character. That image right there is specifically not just for them, but they inspired that zone. When it comes to, you mentioned medical uses and those kinds of things, you know, we see, you know, all over the country, large-scale giant hospitals, and those can't do much of that. That's what we call a special district. You know, the hospital is just so big and it's not about to be walkable, and that doesn't make sense. But
On the other hand, you see all sorts of ancillary medical uses in buildings and things that go along with hospitals to support that. And like, you know, where I live, you know, it's all medical, Nashville's all about medical. And so you are able to take those smaller uses, ancillary uses, and incorporate them into, there's nothing that would say that any of the, none of the pictures that I've shown you tonight couldn't be doctor's offices or, you know, dialysis clinics or whatever the case may be. In fact, one of the places we're working with right now to make a new center, one of the anchor tenants is going to be the regional hospital that wants to start to have more of these clinics, and they're actually going to, you know, focusing on taking sort of a whole strip of these mixed-use buildings where they'll actually have people living above, but on the ground floor have things like, you know, the clinics and the testing centers, and having, you know, other things like therapeutic yoga and all these kind of things that fit into a streetscape really nicely. And so there's no reason that these things can't fit in when they're a smaller scale like that, except for just like, you know, now we have to kind of think through it a little more, do something different than we normally do. Sometimes I will, you know, being honest, like we talked about with the fast food and, you know, the auto-oriented kind of stuff, it does require people to sort of think through their plans a little bit differently. You know, it's like, okay, well, and we ran into this with this regional health center that, you know, they weren't used to having a front door on a street, you know, on a sidewalk. They were focused on their parking lot, and said, well, you still have the parking lot, there'll be a certain number of people who will drive in that way, but for this to be a real streetscape and to feel vital and active, you need to lay out your floor plan so that there's a door where people can come in on the street side and it's not locked, even if it looks like a door. It needs to be functional. It can't just be locked or have big windows or all that stuff. And so it's like, oh, okay, I get it. That's different than what we normally do, but we get that you're trying to do something here. We want to be part of that. We want to, you know, help with the community in that regard. So
there will be a mechanism for uses and forms of development that can't comply, that where you need that relief you're talking about. And Brian mentioned this in passing, it is the special district. If like right this second we had the whole code in place, and somebody had, you know, I mean, 3 points is a big idea. I mean, it really is a big idea. It's a great idea. It can't fit into the normative zones. And so what they would do is they come and they say, we can't fit into these normative zones. Here's why. It's just not possible for us to do what we're doing. We want to do a special district. And then so they would apply to do a special district, and the standards for the special district would be set up. It sort of is like all the good parts of PUD without all the bad parts, because you would say, and we really like your building stacked this way. It wouldn't be just like a lot of PUDs, I don't know how y'all do it here, but a lot of PUDs, somebody comes forward and just says, I'm going to do this much retail, this much this much that, here's your local background, please approve it. And that's really the full extent of some municipalities' approach to PUDs. Other ones, I live in a PUD. It's a PUD because it couldn't be built under the existing zoning laws at that time, because they, in that particular city, it was like, you got to separate all your uses. You can't have mixed use. You have to have lots that are 100 feet wide. All those things kept it from being what the developer would develop, which was a walkable neighborhood. So it was a PUD for great purpose. But it has very, very specific standards that go with it. It's not just that we're going to come do this many units of residential, this many units of retail, that kind of stuff. But there would be a mechanism for that.
But the mechanism shouldn't be used just because I want it.
And it actually, and the code would say, isn't they're going to be used sparingly and not just to avoid zoning law. It would just say that right on the face.
There's some communities we work in where to get a variance, you have to prove a hardship, and they haven't approved a variance in the last like 30 years. It's like never done. It's like, it's got to be a real hardship, not just because.
And there are others that every deal is like 100 variances.
Right.
It just depends on where you are.
Right.
Again, I'm gonna make a comment that I think if you wanna have diversity and change in your community, you can't be that rigid, that you don't make changes or give allowances. But on the other hand, you can't just throw your hands up and say, Mr. Developer, wherever you want, where you go, because you don't fit the program. I do agree that you need to have an oversight group. That'll have to be decided who it's gonna be. And again, I have some concerns about that.
So I would say like a special district, it gets approved different from, somebody that can comply with the standards for the normative district. They might get approved with, partly administrative approval, partly planning commission approval. And they met all the rules that done. To do a special district, it would be a town council action. It would be, I mean, so essentially, like you probably do.
Well, you'd also have to have a public hearing.
Oh, there's no question you have.
And have the public involved as to what this is gonna be, and hear the comments. You know, we had the not to hold everybody up, we had the 2010 comprehensive plan. That was a major shift to push the buildings against the streets. Before that, we had a mixed deal. A lot of buildings were like the Jewels, back away from the streets.
Right.
Like McDonald's and all up and down, the grocery stores up and down were away from the streets. And it put people out front. You know, there's obviously different ways of doing things. But now we're talking about similar to Centennial Village, you're putting all the stores and restaurants against the street, and then you have parking behind. Now, those businesses, their front door is not on Taggart Avenue. It's to the parking lot.
Yeah, baby steps.
In my judgment, that most zoning codes say that your front door will be the street. Nearly everyone, y'all does the same. And so it left that door open for us. There are a number of things, y'all, we talked about the zone laws having been adopted in the 80s. It is really based on, not 1980s. It's really based on 1920s. It's the kind of the essential separation of uses, spread everything apart, and it's like way out of date. You know, and it just doesn't have something to do. Up until now, it's been critical because it's so deficient in what it has in it, that you guys have had the oversight and site plan process that you have, because otherwise it literally would have been really good. And so, and those things probably came to it a little bit later when you started seeing it. If you just say this is commercial, and that's all I can say about it, literally anything can happen there. So if you don't add to that site plan process, you're in trouble.
If you look at like I think Shoop's is like this, maybe the Mediterranean restaurant. You can park in the back, you can walk in the back door, but you also go in the front door. Same thing. People are like, oh my God, it's impossible. In 2018, we can't do this, and there's no way it'll ruin our business. And it's like, no, it's just not what you want to do, you know. And so,
someone else here might give me a date that Shoop's put together, but I'm going to say that's probably the 50s.
Yeah.
And the 1950s, and the town did have a program in the 70s to put and tie in some of the facades of the store. I don't know whether the sentiment is that they were successful or not, but they did try to tie in.
Yep. Who else? Anybody else? Who wants to go home and eat dinner? All right. Well, this is, like I said, the beginning. So all of the questions and things that you've all been asking, once we get, some more feedback and get a draft going, and we can really look at and understand more kind of how we're dealing with these things. A lot of the stuff I'm saying right now, just off the top of my head, based on 5 days worth of work, and so as we go through this process, we'll understand more and more about, kind of the direction everything needs to head and what you guys are wanting to do. So if you're interested as we move forward, keep coming back and bring people with you. And if you're afraid or skeptical, keep coming back. If you're excited, also keep coming back. Because a lot of times when people are content and happy with what they heard, they quit coming, and maybe it doesn't end up how you thought it was going to. So thanks everybody for coming and being here all week.